Of my office.
Yeah, well, you guys
That good,
seem
Dustin?
fine.
Are you over by Tank's green things?
My office probably looks like it.
Yeah, the view you're
Although
getting.
I am excited to
fine.
see the new park complex up at Town Hall. That looks like a pretty awesome project, man.
Oh, the aquatic center.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it comes together the way it was planned out, it should be pretty awesome.
Well,
Supposed
we'll
to have
hope
like
for the best.
9 indoor pickleball courts.
Ooh, you guys are going indoor. Awesome, man.
Well, it's
That
got
makes a lot
3
of sense.
basketball courts inside of it, and then each one of them can be set up for 3 pickleball courts.
All right. You're gonna be stealing all the old people from Oil Valley, man.
Between
Good
that
luck.
and Norma May, we'll get them in the afternoon and then get them in the evening.
There you go.
So, I think we're waiting on a couple more folks. And then we'll start, I guess. What do we have? Let's see. Michael from ADWR. Good morning.
Good morning. Hello.
Hi. We're waiting for a couple more speakers. If they don't attend, we'll read their part, I think. Who are we missing? Swarita and County.
Yeah, Patricia was asking for the invite for this morning's meeting. I just sent it to her, but you might want to
okay.
look for that, Elizabeth.
Okay, let's see. Let's see. Do I go? How do you do an invite? There's a way to invite, right? No.
Yeah, I usually just forward my calendar. Oh, there she is.
Thank you, John Spiker. Good morning.
Hey, I only got back into town last night.
Well, the district isn't presenting, but we're here for questions.
What? What?
Yeah, we're not presenting.
Where's Dr. Greg Sachs?
He is traveling. And I'm teaching a very robust class today, this afternoon. So
Oh,
that's a priority. Camille needs the invite as well. She does not have it. I don't know if she's on.
See, I think I invited her. Do you think she got it? I don't know.
She just communicated to me that she didn't. I'm trying to forward it to her.
she's probably going to get it 1,000 times now.
Did you just send it to her, Spiker? Okay, thank you. Thank you. She's our new community coordinator, our public person.
Oh,
She's fairly new, so it wasn't appropriate to put her in front of this meeting at this time.
No, she'd be a good listener at this point, I would think.
Correct. Yeah, there's a lot for her to embrace right now.
so we're gonna go ahead and start the meeting. Hello, everybody. Good morning. This is Elizabeth Leibold. I work at the City of Tucson. I'm in floodplain administration. Today, we're going to have several agencies speaking about reducing your risk, providing you with various tools and website links to look at ways you can reduce your flood risk and erosion hazard risk. We'll talk about consideration for flood insurance. Again, this is an engineering staff presenting. We aren't part of a commercial business for selling insurance. This is engineering staff in the state office of financial and insurance institutions presenting today. The presentation will cover areas in southern Arizona. This presentation was provided yesterday, and we'll be covering same information as we presented yesterday. Next slide. Again, we have various agencies here represented. The town of Marana, the town of Oro Valley, City of Tucson, town of Sahuarita, Pima County Unincorporated, and the state. We're going to be talking about the goal of most of the regional agency municipalities is to reduce your flood and erosion hazard risks and reduce associated costs with flooding. Next slide. Today we're going to go over flooding and erosion hazard risks, how to look at maps, how to obtain map information, how to find a correct contact, to talk about various ways to reduce your flooding and erosion hazard risk. We'll talk about different types of zones in the flood areas, and we'll talk about insurable property and what that means, and additional contacts. Next slide. Today's presenters are myself, Elizabeth. I work at the City of Tucson, John Spiker from town of Oro Valley, Dustin Ward from the town of Marana, Nalo Valle is from the town of Sahuarita. I believe he may not be joining us today. He's super busy down there, so I'll be presenting for him. We have Patricia Gilbert from Pima County Regional Flood Control District. And we have James McGuffin from the Arizona Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions, who will be wrapping up the meeting. If you have questions, please post them in the chat, or you could raise your hand and we can discuss your inquiry. Next slide. As many residents know, here in Tucson, we have a unique condition. We have about 7 to 8 inches of rain in the summer, about 3 to 4 inches in the winter. And there's a lot of different types of storms. We have the big hurricane, tropical depression type storm precipitation. It comes up from Baja that may be 1 to 2 to 3 days of rain. And more commonly, we have the chubasco, which is a convective cloud formation that we frequently see with lots of lightning. Next slide. So there's various types of regulations and equations that the city and the other jurisdictions use to compute what a flood is. And so our flood maps are based on various types of equations to determine where we expect to see the flood occur. during what we call regulatory flooding, which is the 100-year storm, and other storm event time periods. This image is showing that, you know, for radar, these rain events can drop at any location. So it's hard to estimate exactly how much rain we can get at any given location. Next slide. Various types of risks and hazards are occurring during these storm events. And there's a big list here. We'll have this PowerPoint presentation made available to you at the City of Tucson Floodplain Administration website. And when the recording is saved and downloaded in a few days. But overall, there's various types of risks and hazards that can occur. Everything from, you know, precipitation train, hard long-term rains that could occur over a time period that come across from the west, to various types of erosion issues and debris flow conditions. Next slide. You can find out more about the City of Tucson's floodplain management plan by going to the City of Tucson Floodplain Administration website. This document we considered fairly easy read. It's kind of interesting, and it also goes over the goals of the City of Tucson to reduce risk and reduce hazards. Next slide. So FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, administers the National Flood Insurance Program. And that provides the flood insurance regulations and creates these FEMA flood maps, what we call the flood insurance rate map. The City of Tucson, like other jurisdictions, is given the authority through FEMA to create floodplain ordinances, which regulate what happens in flood zones. So floodplain use permitting is directly coming from those municipalities. In the National Flood Insurance Program, there's the community rating system, and each municipality that participates in the CRS gets certain points for the different types of floodplain and erosion hazard management activities that they do. And those credits equate to a reduction in the flood insurance that people get for that within that community. Savings can range between 5 to 45%. In the City of Tucson, we have a 20% reduction in flood insurance premiums. In Pima County unincorporated properties, if you purchase flood insurance, the reduction is 40%. So it's a good deal to consider flood insurance in the city and in especially unincorporated county. Next slide. You can obtain flood insurance even if you're not in a flood zone or a high-risk FEMA flood zone. If you have a building or if you want to insure contents within the rented building that you're living in, you can obtain flood insurance, and that's anybody. Keep in mind that flood insurance is required for those properties that are in a high-risk FEMA flood zone and have a loan that is federally backed. Next slide. Local floodplains can also exist. In the City of Tucson, we have the FEMA high-risk zones and the local regulatory flood zones. you're required to have the flood insurance when you're in the high-risk FEMA zones. You are required to have a floodplain use permit if you're doing work in the local or the FEMA flood zones. Next slide. Permits are required for walls and fences. In some cases, if the wall is determined to be in a flood zone, it'll have the $58 fee plus the $65 floodplain use permit. Those are approximate costs there. But the idea here is that staff will check the proposed wall or fence to see if it's in a floodplain or if there's drainage that would require you to put in wall openings or openings for the fence. Fences and walls can block flow, divert flows, capture debris, and cause diverted flows or failure of the wall or fence. And concentrated flows can then damage and cause additional erosion. Property owners should keep in mind that you don't want to bear that liability of building a wall or fence in a flood zone and then causing damage to downstream properties. So it's a good idea to come in or talk to your local jurisdictional engineering staff and check to see whether you need a wall or fence permit. Next slide. So in the FEMA flood zones, there's low risk X unshaded zones. Medium risk areas are called X shaded. And then there's the high risk, the A zones. Those are the A zones are the ones that require the flood insurance if you have a federally backed loan. And those A zones are the aqua blue colors on the FEMA maps. Next slide. So the various A zones or AE, et cetera, they mean various things to engineering staff, such that the E zone means that we have elevation data for the depth of the water during regulatory storm. The AO1s, AO2s say that there is a 1 foot, 2 foot, or 3 foot depth in those areas. Next slide. The black dotted area you see in the center of this map indicates that it's an X shaded area. This particular X shaded area is a levee protected area from the Santa Cruz River levee that runs along that eastern bank. There's 3 types of X shaded. There's those that are protected from a levee that's protected from just the 100-year, not the 500. And then there's X shaded that's for a shallow sheet flow condition. And then there's X shaded that is, help me out here, I forgot the third one. Anybody? Oh, we got a third category. There's 500, there's, oh yeah, the 500-year X shaded, the 100-year shallow, and then the X shaded for protected against levee.
There you go.
Next slide. And you can see that there's different colors in the city of Tucson, map Tucson GIS map. You can type in map Tucson and go to I want to. There's a blue button that says I want to. Type in the word flood, choose city flood data, and you will be seeing these types of entities on the map and the various colors. If you hover over, they'll explain that it might be a protected from a levee or a 500-year flood, etc. And there's the list of the 3 types. Again, the aqua blue are the high-risk FEMA, and the red or pink areas in the city maps are considered the local floodplain. Next slide. It's a good idea to contact your local jurisdiction to find out if you're mapped in a flood zone. There are some areas that don't have the mapping for these floodplains. They may have a center line that indicates that there is regulatory flood, maybe running down a street, but the width of that floodplain hasn't been mapped. There's other areas that actually don't have any mapping whatsoever. And so it is a good idea to talk to your engineering staff about where your property is located with respect to not just the FEMA flood zone, but also local floodplain, as well as erosion hazards. Next slide. So again, it is required for local floodplain as well as the FEMA floodplain to obtain floodplain use permitting to build additions, to do other permitted development on your property. If your project is impacted by an erosion hazard, you will also be required to have a floodplain use permit. And to reiterate, walls and fences do need permits. Next slide. So there's various types of hazards that occur, and so knowing what your hazards are, knowing where you're, what zone you're in, understanding whether or not you need a permit, and also reducing your risk by other measures is important to consider. Over a third of the policies in the city of Tucson from some previous data indicated that within the city of Tucson, there was a third of the policies that were just in the X zones. In other words, even though it's only required for the FEMA A zones, there was a third of those policies were actually in other zones that weren't really required to have flood insurance. But the property owner chose to get it because I believe they're doing the prudent thing. Because probably maybe they're located in a local floodplain, or maybe they're near a wash or other consideration. It is important to think about it, even though you may not be in a FEMA flood zone. Consider getting flood insurance because these monsoons are unpredictable. Next slide. This photo shows the Rito in 2006. Note that there is soil cement along the embankment. These soil cement embankments provide erosion protection to these large flash flood conditions where velocities and debris flow is occurring, and that protects the city from additional flooding and hazard. Next slide. So the community does various things to help reduce flood risk and to reduce associated costs. We have floodplain ordinances that are updated periodically, and we require floodplain use permitting, as mentioned. We enforce various regulations, and we do other activities such as floodplain and erosion hazard management plans. We do these outreach events. We have an email that people can email if they have concerns about their property or other questions. There's 2 emails at the city of Tucson. One is t.concerns@tucsonaz.gov, and we'll have somebody add that to our chat. And then also Tucson Flood Erosion info@tucsonaz.gov. Those 2 emails can be contacts to help the public email us and talk to us about something they observe. Perhaps there's some hazard seen, and they identify that, and our street staff might go out and do a correction and a public wash if there's something going on. For example, as mentioned earlier, the city of Tucson has a 20% discount from doing all these different types of activities. And to reiterate, you can get flood insurance for your building or the contents, such as for renters. Also, if you choose to have contents and building coverage for your own home, it is optional to have either or. Okay, next slide. Other things that the city are doing, we have various programs such as our sandbag program and Operation Splash, where the city of Tucson sets up barricades at our dip crossings, and we provide sandbags and sand at various locations that we advertise. This is usually set up before monsoon and during the first part of monsoon to provide the public opportunity to come over with their truck or car and shovel the sandbags. Sometimes there's staff out there to help the elderly or those that need assistance in sandbagging. There's also set up during the times when we expect a large let's say tropical storm coming up from Baja. We do advertise and set up locations. Other jurisdictions also, some of the other jurisdictions do this. I believe or town of Oro Valley also participates in some of these types of activities. We also do correction or retrofits to damaged drainage way or storm drain systems. And we do various types of projects when funding is available. The city works with the Army Corps of Engineers, Pima County Regional Flood Control District, and FEMA to assist us in these different types of projects. The city applies for federal grants to obtain assistance as well for doing various types of studies, as well as hopefully constructing some storm drain improvements and bank protection projects. We have 2 grants being looked at this year. I think that's the next. Oh, I wanted to mention one more thing. When a jurisdiction has maintenance activities that they can document over the years that they perform drainage way maintenance activities, this is key to obtaining disaster relief funding during different types of declarations by the state during a flood event or an erosion hazard event. The federal government will be asking, show us that you've been doing maintenance for these areas that were damaged. The city of Tucson is in a good position as we do maintenance activities. And so we anticipate that disaster relief funding would be available to us. There may be other requirements, and the city of Tucson actively works on our emergency management plan. Next slide. There's specific things you can do for your property to be prepared for flooding. One thing to consider is placing an interceptor swale, if you don't have one, along the sides or the back or rear front of your property to direct water around and away from the building. This can help with smaller storm events, and during large events, help to direct the water away from the house. There's other things you can do, and this presentation will be available to you in a couple days on our website. Next slide. Post-fire conditions. So after a fire event, a fire event, the burned vegetation and the charged soil form a water repellent layer. This blocks the water from being absorbed and increases the runoff potential. So the risk for flooding is increased after a wildfire for downstream properties in the areas of wildfire. The cost of damage, the damage for floodwaters to a home for even 1 inch of water can be up to $25,000. So again, considering flood insurance is a prudent thing to do. You can talk to your insurance company to see what kind of rates might be available for your property. There's various types of waiting periods that may apply to the policy. In most cases, there's a 30-day wait period. In the case of a wildfire, in some cases, after the declaration that the wildfire has been 100% contained, it is understood that the 30-day wait period is exempt. So, but check with your flood insurance or your insurance company to see what the conditions apply. Next slide. This slide is brought to you by Golden Ranch Fire District, and it talks about helping you reduce your risk from wildfires and flood by trimming trees, providing areas where you're collecting your debris and then disposing of it properly. Debris that's washed away can go into our washes and clog culverts. So it's important that the debris is collected and thrown out properly. You can also sign up with myalerts.pema.gov for local emergency alerts. Next slide. In some cases, the water courses have soil cement or other types of bank protection that provides protection against flooding. There's many locations where the soil cement for the regional water courses protect for the jurisdictional or regulatory 100-year flood. In other cases, in other locations, that soil cement may not be protecting for the 100-year and might be only protecting for a 50-year storm event. So it's important, if your property is near a regional water course, to discuss what type of risk you have for your property near these regional water courses. Talk to the engineering staff at your local municipality and find out if you're protected from the 100-year event. Also ask about your flood zone and your erosion hazard setbacks. Next slide. On this, the City of Tucson engineering staff can verify the real estate MLS documents. So those real estate documents actually have 2 line items. One says FEMA flood insurance required, yes or no. Municipal flood requirements, are they applicable and for this property, yes or no? Sometimes this data is not properly filled out, so double check with your local engineering staff to verify the MLS status. The engineering staff at your local municipality will also have FEMA flood maps, FEMA flood depth data charts, and other information. Next slide. You can call 520-837-5341 for the City of Tucson flood status. They also provide elevation certificate data, how to obtain it, or if there's an elevation certificate already for that property. There's various types of services, such as helping you understand how to do an elevation certificate, and also providing you with final plat information as to whether or not there's drainage easements that are either privately or publicly maintained. Next slide. There's also a way to go online. City of Tucson Development Center online also provides an opportunity. Next slide. Next slide, please. The construction certificates, including such things as elevation certificates, are required for building permits where you have a structure that's in a floodplain, whether it's FEMA or local floodplain. We want to make sure that you're building the finished floor high enough and that the adjacent grade to your building structure is also high enough on a building pad that takes you out of that flood zone. Next slide. Congress over the years has tried to make changes to the actuarials for insurance and the flood insurance program. In 2012, two congressmen, Biggert and Waters, noticed that there was incongruities to the actuarials, such that some people were getting certain discounts and others were not. And so they tried to straighten that out and say, hey, everybody's got to pay the fair amount. They found out that it turned out to be a hardship for some who were only paying a few $100s that should have been paying maybe $2,000. So the Homeowners Flood Insurance Affordability Act in 2014 came out and said, we're going to transition that payment so that over the years it slightly increases up a few $100s to achieve that, let's say, $2,000 insurance premium over several years. And then more recently, we have the risk rating 2.0. Although it's been explained to me that there's some reason why it's 2.0, I still think it should be 3.0. And that is a different type of actuarial setup. Unfortunately, the last two changes by Congress have added additional extra surcharges, which are difficult for the city of Tucson in that these surcharges are not reduced by our activity CRS program. We are requesting that they get rid of those surcharges through communications with the federal government with feedback that they're requesting on the CRS program. Next slide. We'll provide contact information on the City of Tucson on the webpage, on our website, as well as in the chat. Next slide. There's various resources and information that we'll provide for you. Next slide. Just as a heads up, on June 11th, we're going to have the City of Tucson Floodplain Management Plan Annual Update meeting. That'll be held here in the Public Works Department, 201 North Stone Avenue. And that's from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. on June 11th. That's a Tuesday. We also have a stormwater workshop on June 26th. And that's primarily focusing on water quality. So the storm drain system and pollutants in the storm drain system, how we reduce that, different activities that we do. Various presenters will be available at both these events. The website will be updated with an agenda that's coming out in the next week or so. Keep in tune with checking that website, City of Tucson Floodplain Administration, for updates. Next slide. Is there any questions? You can either raise your hand or I see maybe there's a chat question. The chat has our emails there available for questions. The TDOT concerns is for maintenance primarily or various issues. And then also the Tucson flood erosion info, that's questions about regulation or other mapping perhaps. Okay, next slide. Our next speaker is, oh, why is that not updated? I updated that, I thought. Sorry, John.
No, that's okay. I can pretend to be Scott.
Spiker.
Thank you,
Oro
Elizabeth.
Valley.
My name is John Spiker. I'm the Stormwater Division Manager for the town of Oro Valley. Welcome everybody this morning, and Elizabeth covered a plethora of information in regard to floodplains and erosion hazards and kind of mitigating the risks for the public. Next slide, please. I'm going to walk you through a few things here that the town of Oro Valley is doing and how the public might serve themselves. Next slide, please. 3 takeaways I want everybody to take with them after today's presentation. Floodplains and erosion hazards are mitigated or managed through the town of Oro Valley's Town Code, Chapter 17. I also want to let the folks know you can go and look at the status of your property on your own using our interactive floodplain inquiry map. And we'll show you where that is, but orovalleyaz.gov is a great place to go start your investigation. And please, as always, kind of piggybacking on what Elizabeth said, we're here to help. If you guys have questions or things aren't making sense to you, please reach out to us. You can stop in 11,000 North La Cañada. That's La Cañada and Naranja up here in Oro Valley. You can email us, give us a phone call. We're happy to help and try to help the public understand what it is they're looking at. And then lastly, again, we'll give you those contacts so you can ring us up or email us if you have any specific questions. Next slide, please. Perfect. So this is our homepage here at Oro Valley. This is where you'll go at orovalleyaz.gov. The easiest thing to do, because there's a multitude of departments in here, multitude of web pages to hit, go up to that search bar on the upper right and just type in floodplain information, or really whatever you might be looking for from the town. The search functionality works great here in our search engine. So just type in floodplain information and that will drive you to what we're talking about today. Next slide, please. Perfect. So this will bring you to our floodplain information page from the stormwater utility. There's some information on here, but there's a link right below where it says floodplain information. You'll click it for the floodplain inquiry map. And next slide. This is the splash pad or the landing page for the floodplain inquiry. What you're seeing here are a variety of streams in blue and then the associated floodplains. Piggybacking on what Elizabeth said earlier, we do not have every single floodplain identified. We've got a majority, but we cannot guarantee that we've evaluated every single floodplain. So as Elizabeth mentioned, it behooves the public to reach out to the engineering staff here at Oro Valley, should you live in Oro Valley, and get the most up-to-date or accurate information possible. But this website is regularly updated. New floodplains are identified all the time. Either a new development comes in and modifies an existing floodplain, or they go study a floodplain that has not been studied previously. That information is, once it's approved, we upload it onto this inquiry map here. So it is as real time as we can make it. And you can drive in or drill down in to the floodplains themselves and get more information should you want it. I'm going to take this time to hit a pause. There's a couple of bits of information I think the public really should understand. First and foremost, Elizabeth touched on it. you cannot obtain flood insurance immediately. There is a waiting period in most circumstances. So I'm appreciative that the city of Tucson's putting this forum on now. The monsoons are roughly about a month away. So should you desire to obtain flood insurance, now's a great time to reach out to your insurance provider and have those discussions. Secondarily, home insurance, property insurance does not cover flood damage. So if you're carrying homeowners insurance policies for your property, more than likely it will not cover damage due to flooding. So please reach out to your insurance providers and have those discussions. Next slide. So now we've drilled down in. What we're looking at is the Canyon del Oro High School up here on Calle Concordia and Oracle Road. We've selected that polygon, and that shows you that we're in that parcel. Now we're going to drive into that yellow floodplain. You can see the floodplains kind of encapsulating the high school there. So we have the ability to click on that yellow polygon, if you will, that yellow shape, and see what information the town has loaded up for you. Next slide, please. And you can see it's been highlighted. We typically give you the date that that floodplain was created, who created that, and other various flood information or flow information, should we have that available. Elizabeth walked you through the various types of FEMA floodplains. Again, not every floodplain has the same information, so it is well within your interest to reach out to us should you not see what you might be looking for. But we've tried to upload as much as possible so people can serve themselves. Next slide, please. And lastly, here we've got some contacts. Paul Kiesler is the floodplain administrator, in addition to being the town engineer and the public works director. You can kind of tell we're a smaller entity. Again, my name is John Spiker. I'm the Stormwater Utility Division Manager. My group is responsible for project review, permit review. Elizabeth brought up a great condition, fences and walls. Just because they don't meet the height requirement for a permit, you might be wanting to put a wall or a fence right across the floodplain. That certainly would trigger a permit. You can reach the Stormwater Utility Division here at 520-229-4850, or you can always send us an email, pw@orovalleyaz.gov. We typically respond that day, but again, no guarantees for that, but we try to respond rapidly, particularly right now as people are inquiring about floods and flood insurance. We're going to try our best to respond to you immediately. With that, I'm available for any questions. And please, if you have feedback, positive or negative, send it our way. We want to try to make our information better. So thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.
Next slide. Next speaker is Dustin Ward with the town of Marana. Dustin? I think.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Is the mic on? You can go to the next slide. So as Elizabeth said, my name is Dustin Ward. I manage development engineering within development services for the town of Marana. Our floodplain division is within my division, and we do regulate all of the floodplains within the town, all of the permitting, as well as all the new development that occurs throughout the town. You can go to the next slide. So this first slide that we're seeing here is the Ina Cortero area. This is an aerial image that took place before the '83 flood. And then if you go to the next image, or the next slide, this is what happened after the '83 flood occurred. So you can definitely see the areas where the Santa Cruz, where the water encroached outside the Santa Cruz and caused a lot of flooding in that area. This area has since been developed quite a bit, a lot of bank protection around the Santa Cruz. So this is the type of situation that we don't expect to see in in the standard 100-year event going forward. You can go to the next slide. So here at the town, we have a 3-tiered approach to protect our communities from flooding. The town of Marana is a CRS community, and approximately 70% of our town is still within a floodplain. So we do protect, preserve our floodways and our natural drainage ways. We have regulatory tools, and then we have structural tools. You can go to the next slide. So to protect our floodways and natural drainage ways, we have standard setbacks from the Santa Cruz. And then if the developer or applicant chooses to want to get closer, then they have to do in-depth and engineering analysis to demonstrate that any new developments will be protected. And then even after the analysis, there's minimum setbacks that still keep them away from the Santa Cruz. And if they decide to want to get closer than that, they have to go even deeper into another analysis. So we do everything we can to keep people set back from the Santa Cruz just in case we do have any issues. We also have some legacy zoning zones that run along the Santa Cruz, and they are flagged as floodway zones. And those zonings also prohibit development along the fringe of the Santa Cruz. And there's no development permitted within these zones, and the only way to develop within them is to rezone the property, which we do this to make sure that we can keep people safe. The natural drainage ways, we try to keep these as undisturbed as we can. If people choose to alter these, then they have to do same thing, an engineering analysis to determine how they're going to pick up the flow from where it enters the property. And then they have to return it back to where it exits the property. Flows cannot increase as they leave the property, and there are some areas of the town where they have to reduce the flows as it leaves the property. Next slide. So on this map, this is kind of the highlighted general area of the town of Marana. The dark blue line coloring that you see throughout the map, that is the Santa Cruz. The lighter blue is the areas that we know to experience 100-year flooding. And the purple line that kind of runs through there, that is the CAP canal. This is one of our it's not our drainage feature, but it is a feature, and it does intercept a lot of the flows off the Tortolitas. And then there are some offshoots from that CAP canal that release any excess water that goes into the CAP back onto the other side. You can go to the next slide. All right, so our regulatory tools, first and foremost, is education. We do have the website listed here, which is our floodplain management website. We've got brochures here at the town. Our wash monitors are kind of in partnership with Pima County Flood Control. And then we're always happy for people to come in and sit down with us, and then we can show you what your property is, what flood zone you're in, explain the process to get you through the permits, as well as what needs to be done so that you can build compliant with the ordinance. You're safe, and you're safe. Our ordinance does establish that any new master plan communities, and that is any community greater than 10 lots, has to be removed from the special flood hazard area. And this is accomplished by the Clomer-Lomer process. Through the Clomer-Lomer process. Outside of our planned communities, they have to meet the ordinance requirements, which does require them to elevate 1 foot above the established FEMA zone. This is a town requirement as well as state requirement. And these communities that are outside of those master plans, they have to get a floodplain use permit for the work within the floodplain, and they have to provide a elevation certificate at the end. We also go one step farther. After we issue the permit, we actually, in working with our building department, we have restrictions that we put on the building permit that prevent the home from going past certain stage gates that would prevent and well the restrictions prevent certain major items from happening in the construction of the house. The biggest one is the foundation. Foundation cannot be poured and won't be inspected by our building department until we go out and verify that it is at the right elevation and it is compliant with the ordinance. And we do this so that we know when the EC is completed, it's going to be accepted and the house is safe, it's compliant, and making sure that you can get that flood insurance when you need it. And then the last step and trigger on our building permit is we won't let the house be finalized until we get that elevation certificate. We've checked it and we've accepted it. Then we release it and allow the building to be finished. So we know that the EC was done so that there's no issues for the homeowner going forward. Next slide. The image is shown on the screen now. These are the natural drainage ways that kind of run through the town. You notice the black line that runs diagonally across is the Interstate 10. And that CAP canal that I mentioned is not shown on this map. But as you see, a lot of the tributaries that are heading from the upper right side of the screen down to the lower left, they all intercept with that CAP canal. And then the few that you see that kind of continue on down, those are the overshoots from that CAP canal. Okay, next slide. So our structural tools is our levee, bank protections. There is two good examples of this in the town. The Santa Cruz is bank protected through North Marana as well as South Marana. Gladden Farms was actually a huge benefactor of the bank protection that was put along Santa Cruz. It removed the entire Gladden Farms community from the floodplain. We also have a levee up in Dove Mountain that protects part of the development up in the Dove Mountain area. And then to remove our communities from the special flood hazard area through the Clomer-Lomer process, it's a series of channels and basins, as well as storm drain systems. So a lot of our communities do use these retention basins, and depending on where you're at within the town limits, they all at a minimum have to be designed to a 1 hour, 100-year storm. Select isolated areas within the town have to be designed with an additional 1 hour, 10-year storm, and all of the basins have the requirements of draining within 36 hours. And then we are very proud of our park system. So a lot of our retention basins are actually designed to a slightly higher standard so that we can use these basins as park amenities. And if you're in the Gladden Farms area, you've seen a lot of these areas that are they're depressed around, you know, what's what I'm looking for. They're depressed, and a lot of the park amenities are down in the bottom of these basins. And when we do get those heavy rainstorms, they do fill up, and typically within 36 hours, they are empty, dry out within about another 24 hours, and then our residents can get back into these areas and use them. In addition to the storm drain, the basins, we have the channels and the storm drain systems that collect the water around the subdivision and bring it to the retention basin where it's held and then it's disposed of. Next slide. So conclusions to ours. Our goal within the town is to protect our residents and our infrastructure from flooding. We also want to protect our natural heritage, and we want to continue to provide a vision for floodplain management going forward that is aesthetically pleasing. Where it's permissible, we like to use it for multi-purposes, the recreational basins, linear parks. And in addition, it's not in our slides, but during the flood season, the town does, our Public Works Division does set up sandbag stations throughout the town. The locations are sent out by our communications division, and our police department actually does public awareness for crossing flooded roadways. And this is all pushed out by our communications division. So if you do live within Marana, and you're getting those emails from our communications division, you're going to see all of this within that announcement. And that is all I have for the town.
Thanks, Dustin. Next slide. If there are any questions, please post in the chat. Next slide. Our next presenter is going to be me for the town of Sahuarita on behalf of Nalo Vale, who is the, I believe he's like a public works city town engineer or something. Big shot over there, Sahuarita. He's super busy, so I'm presenting. Next slide. This town of Sahuarita has code, it's Title 14 for their flood and erosion hazard management. All development and construction activities must adhere to these codes. Next slide. The town of Sahuarita has a floodplain use permit application that's available on their website, and floodplain use permitting is required in the flood zones. Next slide. The town of Sahuarita has the Santa Cruz River passing through it. So the Santa Cruz River floodplain is a serious floodplain to consider. If you're in the town of Sahuarita, please contact their Public Works Department for more information about flood reduction and flood use permitting. There's an email available, as you can see there. Next slide. If there's any questions, please post in the chat. Next slide. Our next presenter is Pima County Regional Flood Control District. Next slide. Patricia?
Good morning, everyone. We're actually not presenting this morning due to scheduling, vacations, and staffing. However, I did want to provide some websites and website addresses to specific pages that provide a numerous amount of information and some contacts. Greg Sack, our CRS coordinator, he is one of the people that is taking a vacation. Myself, Patricia Gilbert, I've worked for Pima County Flood Control for about 18 years. I review commercial and residential development, and I am the riparian habitat review manager. Everything said today is basically we mimic those things. And Camille Hall, I want to just ask her to turn on her camera. She is fairly new to us and learning all the things about floodplain management. She is our community engagement manager. Please say hello. And just really quick, the Flood Control District does a variety of things for floodplain management activities. Like I said, it mimics all of what you guys have been talking about. We do our activities through permitting. We have a robust violation and complaint program. We conduct floodplain mapping all throughout Pima County and even assist with some jurisdictions in that. We obtain flood-prone land and set it aside for life, essentially, just to stay out of it. We also teach, yours truly teaches CEC classes to realtors, all about floodplain management to educate them. And we also have a robust infrastructure management division that takes care of all of our infrastructure. And, you know, the list sort of goes on, but that's a little bit of what we do. And yeah. Any questions? All righty. Well, you all have a great day, and thank you so much for inviting us to this meeting.
Thanks, Patricia. Next slide. Next presenter is the Arizona State Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions. Next
Good
slide.
morning. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Next slide, please. And one more. Yeah, good morning. My name is James McGuffin. I'm an assistant director with the Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions. This is some of our contact information here on the screen. I know it's going to be available after the presentation and in the chat as well. So next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about DiFi to start out. We call ourselves DiFi because our name is long. We are the result of a 2020 consolidation of the Department of Insurance and the Department of Financial Institutions. So insurance industry regulation and the banking regulators are within our agency. We are a state agency. Of course, the topic today puts us on the insurance side of the house. And I wanted to highlight some of the things that we do. We license all types of insurance companies and agents. It's a very robust industry in Arizona, as it is across the nation. In Arizona specifically, we license over 400,000 individuals and companies for all different types of insurance. We also monitor the financial health of insurers because it's really important that insurance companies stay solvent so they can pay claims when they need to. And then we also review the rate filings of companies, and the rate filings are basically what they're going to charge premium wise. It doesn't mean that we can necessarily make them charge lower prices. That's really not within our purview, but we can make sure that their premiums are in accordance with state insurance legislation statutes. We also have a full unit that answers consumer questions, and we investigate complaints on insurance companies, on agents, things like that. It can help consumers work their way through contract disputes, things like that when it comes to the insurance policy itself. Next slide, please. So what we've been talking about today a lot is the federal program that offers flood insurance, which is the National Flood Insurance Program. That is a program that is administered from FEMA, which is a federal agency, which means that at the state level, we don't get involved in that. If calls come into our unit with NFIP problems, if we can help, we will, but generally they get referred to the federal side of the house, away from us. We do regulate some aspects of a few private flood insurance products, so this is not with the federal backing. There's very few of these in the state. On any given day, there might be 5 or 10 providers who offer a private flood insurance product. And in those cases, any type of a dispute or claim problem or issue would come to us, and we would have jurisdiction over that. Next slide, please. So, one of the downsides of going last in these presentations is a lot of your material gets covered, but the upside is the fact that it allows us to work through this a little bit faster. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on things that have already been covered unless they really bear to be reiterated. But, just want you to kind of keep in mind that there's a lot of perils that affect homeowners in the terms of earthquakes and tornadoes and hurricanes, and a lot of those I think we can recognize as being regional in nature. But flooding is one of those things that happens everywhere. Every state is susceptible to some form of flooding, some worse than others, of course. And it's not just about rivers and dry washes overflowing. It's a lot about when there's been a wildfire and as has already been mentioned, the increased risk of flooding that creates. And it's, homeowners should also be looking at their property and how their property drains. So it's, really not necessarily about if you're in proximity to a river or not. If you've done a lot of work in your backyard and all of a sudden it doesn't drain anymore, Those are all considerations that you should look into, because if you get enough rain in a short enough amount of time, or in that neighborhood, and your paved street becomes that dry, what's normally a dry river type of a thing, then it can create an issue for a homeowner. So we just want, and what our focus is going to be today is just to talk about consumers making informed decisions and individual decisions which are best for their situation. So 25% or so, this fluctuates, but of claims from the National Flood Insurance Program are in non-flood zones. So a whole quarter is not in a flood zone. So that should just kind of alert you that bad things happen even when you think you might be in a good situation. Has already been mentioned that flood is not covered by homeowners or renters insurance. This bears repeating. Your standard homeowners will not cover this, and we'll kind of talk about what flooding is here in a second. And then wildfires, I think we've already covered that. If you're upstream of that wildfire, where you might not have ever had an issue before, but now that whole amount of water that used to soak in or go in other places is now coming toward your home. This happened in Flagstaff a couple years ago. It happened in Miami and Globe a couple years ago. So this is all very, very real. So when you have those wildfires, you really have to pay attention. So next slide, please. So if you ask the question, why should I research whether I need it or not? It's because you should start with the general premise that every building is in a flood zone to varying degrees. Some are very obvious and some not so much. As we mentioned in Flagstaff, there are probably a lot of homeowners who live in a kind of a mountainous or hilly area. They probably never thought they were going to be seeing that large flow of water coming down their paved street, all based on the wildfire activity up there, prior to that. So there's some websites that you can go on. I know there's a lot of the municipalities have talked about how you can go into their office or go onto their site. So at least there's a lot of information out there. I've highlighted a couple of them today. One of them is risk factor, and I'll kind of show you what that looks like. I guess my general message is the fact that this is really easy for consumers. You can go onto these websites, you can type in your address, and you can get the information. It is literally at your fingertips, and then you can make those decisions. As was mentioned, nobody on this call sells insurance. The department, DIFI that I'm with does not sell insurance, but we are fans of insurance, and we're fans of insurance because we believe that it protects people's most valuable asset, which is their home generally. So, and we want homeowners to make those informed decisions. Water that enters your home from outside at ground level is what is considered a flood. That is what is not covered by your homeowner's insurance. Sometimes you hear people talk about, hey, my water broke in my, or a water line broke in my attic and it flooded my home, and all of that is true, and that is covered by your homeowner's insurance because it occurs within your structure. But when that water comes in your doorways, or heaven forbid your windows from a different source from outside ground level, it is not going to be covered. And so you just need to make informed decisions about how much coverage you need. A flood insurance policy may cost you less than a homeowner's insurance policy, but it's in addition. So you're talking about 2, possibly even 3 policies, depending on what you want covered. And I think most of us would probably agree we pay a lot for insurance, and sometimes it's cost prohibitive. But what we've seen is where people have opted not to do things, they take that gamble, and if you lose, then they would always say, if I had to do it over again, I would have gotten the insurance. So next slide, please. So you can buy flood insurance policy that covers your house and structure, and one to cover your belongings. This is different from a standard homeowner's policy because within your homeowner's policy, you select generally the amount that it would take to replace your home in the event that it was completely destroyed, say by fire or some other peril. And you also select an amount in there to cover your belongings. It's one policy, but it covers all of those things. Flood insurance is a little different than that. It requires 2 separate policies, one for the structure and one for your contents. Renters can also buy flood insurance for their belongings. That's already been mentioned, so they never have to worry about the structure because they don't own the home. And but they do have an interest in being able to replace their belongings, that type of thing. One thing I didn't mention yesterday was that through the policies through the National Flood Insurance Program have limits on them. So you can ensure that the limit on a residential property is $250,000, and I believe it's $100,000 on your contents. And then you can do a commercial policy which covers the structure for $500,000, and you can also get the $500,000 limit or coverage for the contents. But that's a big consideration for a homeowner because it doesn't take much of a home anymore to reach that $250,000 threshold. So, but that's in the event that you had to replace the whole home. $250,000 would probably go a long way in at least the remediation of the home. And we've talked about the 30-day waiting period. There are some exceptions to that, and one of those is in the event of a wildfire and a federally declared disaster. But that is a pretty high standard to meet. We don't see that very often, so just because there's a wildfire does not mean there's going to be a federally declared disaster. So that is not a good gamble to make. If there's a wildfire in your area, you are downstream of it, and in any way you really want to consider making that move to flood insurance and doing it quickly. You don't want to get inside this 30-day waiting period in the event something bad happens. Next slide, please. And this is data that the NFIP sent me in preparation for this presentation. And it just shows kind of a really historical, about 48 years worth of data for Arizona claims and for Pima County claims, specifically within those claims. So keep in mind right off the bat that the only claims are being made by people who have insurance. So this is not a total picture of all of the losses that were sustained due to flooding. That's not even close. These are the people who had insurance and who made a claim and were paid something. So Arizona, with that little over 5,200 incident number there, that's about, if you do the math, I think it's around 110 or so claims per year. And within Pima County, it's about 12 claims a year. So I think what you kind of take from this map is the fact that some years are better than others, and it probably has a lot to do with how much rain we're getting, and maybe even more specifically how devastating certain storm incidents are when they come in and drop a lot of rain, and there's a big a lot of flooding. Then you're going to see these claims for these people who have insurance. So as you can see that, there's claims every single year for people who have insurance. So that this is not sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. It's more of sometimes it's worse, sometimes it's better. So next slide, please. So if you're interested in it, the way to go is, at least our recommendation be to check the National Flood Insurance Program first. That's floodsmart.gov. The extension is very important there. The .gov gets you to the proper site. If you were to type in .com, you will get somebody who wants to sell you flood insurance. So it is a private entity looking to sell. And you can also, we always recommend calling your homeowner's insurance agent or the company. And if they can offer the NFIP policy through them, then it's a one-stop shop. If not, you can go on to the floodsmart.gov website, and they have insurance providers that they can hook you up with. Next slide, please. And I just kind of wanted to show you, because I'm not an engineer. So I'm on the with all the other presenters kind of are from one thing and I'm from another. So as I prepared for the presentation last year, I went in and pulled up just information on the neighborhood that I live in. I live in Phoenix or actually Glendale, but I just thought, hey, it'd be interesting to type in my address and see what comes up. And I'm right on I'm a little ways away from New River. That striation there, the orange and blue is New River. It's dry 99.9% of the time. And then every once in a while, like every one of these dry washes or rivers, it gets rolling when there's a big event upstream. But there's also some that zone AE up there, which is in the turquoise. That is from what I've learned from the engineers, this is a flood zone there. It's on the other side of the river from me. So it just kind of tells me that I'm in no danger of this, at least from the overflow. Now, I still live in a flat neighborhood, and if it gets enough rain, who knows what's going to happen, right, in my backyard specifically. So next slide, please. And this one, this is that risk factor that I talked about. Same situation, you type in your address, you'll see a map showing basically the same thing. The little red mark is where my house is. You can see the dry riverbank there. The dry area that is a New River there. The interesting thing about risk factor is the fact that it gives you categories down below, and it rates what your risk is. And so in the flood, which is the first one right below that picture, it shows that I'm a 1 out of 10 for my residents, which I take that's a really good good place to be when it comes to flooding. Downside for me is the fire factor, which is an 8 out of 10, which is listed as severe if you look through their metrics to what those numbers correlate to. As a kind of an interesting note, last year when I pulled this information, my house was a 5 out of 10. So I'm not sure what happened, but I know that my insurance premiums are going to go up as a result of this, and they did this year specifically. But it also talks about wind, air, and heat. So it's just good information. There's just a lot of information out there for consumers. Again, it helps you make informed decisions. This is a tough market right now for homeowners, because if you have not experienced your rates increases, stand by. I live in a standard neighborhood, just like any other in Phoenix, and my homeowner's insurance went up 120% this year with no claims. So we're seeing that statewide. We're taking a lot of complaints, a lot of people being, a decent number of people being non-renewed by their company and having to go out and search for additional coverage. So we understand that, with all these premiums going up on standard homeowners insurance, and now the recommendation, hey, go out and grab a flood insurance policy and pay for that as well, along with the auto and everything else. So it is problematic. It is the insurance industry is going through a lot of issues here lately that with inflation and just a lot of increases that are causing them to raise prices, and the risk in Arizona certainly isn't diminishing, which is what they're basing all of their premiums on is risk. So anything we can do to mitigate that risk is going to be better for all of us who pay insurance premiums. So anyway, I think that's my last slide. So I know there's probably one more that asked for questions, but
I have a question. What is considered belongings for renters that want to insure for belongings? What do you think that covers? Furniture?
Yeah, it would be anything that is not part of the structure. Anything they move into the house. So yeah, I think mostly it would be if they have furniture, if they have a gun safe, if they have anything like that they're bringing in when they move in and they're taking out when they leave, that type of thing. And the amount of that will be agreed upon in the policy, right? So if you say, hey, I have $40,000 worth of stuff, the insurance policy is written to cover $40,000 worth of stuff. And that's what your premium is based on.
Okay, thanks, James. Thanks all for being patient, and we had a little bit of an extension for our presentation today. We appreciate your patience. Again, there's lots of contact information in the chat. If you have questions, you can contact us at those links. And with that, we'll go ahead, next slide, and end the meeting. Thank you. Have a good morning, everybody. Bye. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Christina.